Thank you for joining us. I'm Doug Lauer, Director of Sales for Fortify Experts. Today you're going to learn about how to find and hire great cybersecurity talent. Here are the 3 reasons you'll want to watch this webinar. First, you'll learn why it's so hard to find great security talent and why traditional recruiting is only getting you access to about 20% of potential security candidates. Second, you'll find out how to reduce your turnover and increase your access to those A players who will help you exceed your goals and mission-critical tasks. Finally, you'll learn how to attract more top performers to your company. Before we get to the webinar, let me quickly introduce ourselves further. Fortify Experts is a cybersecurity retained search firm based in Houston, Texas. With more than 15 years of security experience, our team leaders have hired a worldwide network of professionals from CISOs to SOC analysts. We're involved in the security community from InfraGard, an FBI private sector collaboration, the ISSA, Cloud Security Alliance, ISC Squared, the Veteran Support Group, and Community Engagement. Ranked as the top cybersecurity search firm in the U.S., we'll save you time by becoming an extension of your team. We will have a thorough understanding of the need, skills, and expectations. The slate of candidates we screen and present are typically not on the market and come directly from our network. They're pre-vetted to ensure that you can hire any one of them. We save money by helping you lower your mishire rates and turnover, and by bringing in game changers who have a great strategic impact on the business. We will also help you lower your risks by operating in the strictest of confidentiality and discretion. By engaging a select group of candidates, we will not expose key vacancies. We also offer you a 5-year replacement guarantee on retained search engagements. We stand behind our candidates. And now onto our webinar, which you're welcome to share with your team. Here's our CEO and founder, Tim Howard, who's here to help you find and hire great security talent. Thanks again.
Well, thanks, Doug. I'm going to first start off with describing why recruiting great talent is harder than it used to be. I see 4 trends occurring that impact how we find and hire great talent. First, with unemployment at all-time low, this is an employee's market because there are more jobs than there are qualified people. In the cybersecurity area alone, there are currently over 1 million open positions, and that's expected to double in 2 years. Candidates can be very selective in the companies they want to work for, and many are even receiving multiple competitive offers. Number 2, in a tight market, there's an influx of junior and inexperienced recruiters from all over the globe who are pounding on candidates, unprofessionally in many cases. Some top candidates say they receive as many as 20 contacts every single day. That's causing candidate fatigue. It's almost a white noise that most happy workers just start to ignore the inbound request, and it's really hard to get their attention. So number 3, there's a trend to move off of social media. You know, for digital privacy's sake, and especially if you're cyber aware, these folks are really moving off of digital platforms and LinkedIn, or they're becoming very vague in what they put out there. So a report shows at least 1/3 of the people are reducing their use of social media, and that, I certainly believe, that's even higher in the cybersecurity world. And then finally, turnover. It's at an all-time high, and it's extremely expensive. Several studies show that it costs more than 2 times the salary to replace somebody. And finding those dedicated and loyal employees is difficult because they don't respond to traditional recruiting methods. The first thing to look at when we're trying to hire great talent is to first ask yourself, what type of candidate do you need to hire? And then what type of recruiting model do you need to use? I'll assume, if you're watching this, that your internal recruiting staff may struggle to find great talent on certain roles, and you occasionally use contingent or retained firms to help. We'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of those models. But first, let's dig into deeper the type of candidate you may need. So first, question that I typically ask is this a mission-critical position? And by that, I mean, does this skill set or expertise or person, if they're suddenly unavailable, can your company function, or can something really bad happen? I look at this in 3 different ways. Do they increase revenue? Like, for instance, sales, or maybe a sales engineer that can close deals for you. Or maybe it's just a product manager that's creating a new product that's going to create revenue. Those are critical roles. Or maybe they optimize processes to save your company money, or automate tasks. They're building out processes that they're going to streamline a lot of manual things that you do today, and that's going to make you more efficient and more competitive. That's mission critical. How about preventing losses? In the cybersecurity world, that's a major deal. When you start looking at Equifax, how they've just received a $750 million fine. Capital One, several days ago, now it's reported they may receive a $120 million fine. These are real losses that are occurring to companies, and they can make or break a company. So when we look at it, you've got to really say, can you afford to hire a B or C player if this is a mission-critical role? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. A C player, these are your lowest performers. In fact, they're fairly easy to replace. They tend to struggle at meeting expectations. They're the first one to be laid off, and you can usually replace them in maybe 2 or 3 weeks through a monster search or maybe a job posting. The B player is really most of your company. That's 70-80% of them. They're the average performers. They show up at 8 o'clock, they leave at 5 o'clock, they get their work done, but they're not really going to set the world on fire. And then you've got the A players. These are the ones that are driving your company forward. In fact, many reports show that these folks will be 2 to 4 times more productive than a B player. But they're extremely hard to find and attract. So how do we get access to more A players? Well, I can tell you this, that most contingent recruiters receive less than a 20% response rate when they even go to candidates. In fact, when you think about they're not paid, they're given a call from a client to say, hey, will you go work on this role for me? And by the way, we're not going to pay you, and we're not going to commit to you, and we're going to recruit on this ourselves. But if you bring me a really great candidate, and it's better than any candidate we can come up with, that we might pay you a fee on that. And so those folks have to work on a lot of different roles in order to make a living. And if a role is difficult, they move on to the next easiest one. Now, I will say we've taken contingent searches, and we're really well known, especially in the cybersecurity world. So we get a really high response rate, but that's still only 33% of the candidates that are out there. So we're leaving 66% of the candidates out there that are not even responding to our requests. So let's take a look a little deeper into these different types of candidates. The first one is the active candidate seeker. I think it's important to know these are the ones that I consider that are putting their resumes out on job boards like Monster, Career Builder, or Dice. And they're not bad people, but they may have been through a situation where they were laid off, or they were cut because of a merger or an acquisition or something, but they've gotten to a point where they're desperate enough to put their resume out there. And even if they find a job, that resume is going to sit out there for the next 3 years. They're going to be the first ones to get a phone call from a recruiter. They're going to be raising their hands. They're going to be taking those phone calls. And they are going to be resulting in a much higher turnover because they're taking those phone calls. Or they may be lower performers that are churning more often at these companies. The next one is what I call a passive job seeker. Now, they're not necessarily posting their resumes, but they are on LinkedIn, and they have a well-defined profile out there, and they still take phone calls, and they answer emails and in-mails. So they're actively pursuing, or at least listening to the next greatest position that's out there. And so there's still going to be some good candidates in that pool, but they're going to be churning more often than the next level. And that's what I call the embedded candidate. These are the candidates that very rarely take phone calls, very rarely answer an InMail. They're satisfied in their job, and they're the 66% or almost 80% of the pool that aren't answering and aren't actively out looking. And how in the world do you get more access to them? There is another pool of candidates I call the non-accessible, and those are the ones that are invested in companies. Maybe they're the founder of a company, or they've got a lot of stock there, or some sort of history that's holding them onto that company. For instance, I get recruiting calls all the time myself, and I'm a founder of the company. I love this company. I love what I do. I'm not going to take a phone call. So there's a certain group that you'll never get access to. So let's take a look at how do we get better access to those embedded candidates. And I'll tell you, it's not through contingent searching. The non-exclusive, non-committed, speed to submit, those folks aren't listening to those. What we have found is that by moving toward a more committed search, where it's exclusive, where both the recruiter and the company are committed, and it's more quality to fit focus than speed to submit, that's where we're starting to get more of these candidates to respond, because they love the fact that there's an exclusivity and it's retained, and that you're calling them specifically in a retained search. I get 10 times better responses, or at least I would say double the response rate, when I call somebody up and say, hey, I'm calling from Fortify Experts, and I'm calling on behalf of XYZ company on a retained search. I've already vetted through your profile, or I've got a referral from somebody that has said you are the right person for this role. Are you willing to listen to that? The response rate is so much better. And even if that particular person is not ready to take a new role, I can then turn around and say, hey, do you know anybody that'd be interested in hearing about a retained search? We get so many more responses because of that, being able to work our personal networks and referral networks. We get access to probably 75% of all the available candidates that are out there. And instead of focusing in on job boards and job postings like many of the contingent recruiters do. So you need to also ask yourself, can you afford a mishire in this particular role, as we talked about? It can cost as much as 2 times their salary to replace them. And think about it, it's not just their salary. It is the time that the manager has spent trying to get this person up to speed and train them. It's also the time that the team has spent with this person. They may have even created a toxic relationship within that team and created productivity issues across the team. So there's a lot of other impacts that we got to think about in a replacement. And then there's the retraining, and then the duplicate recruiting costs in order to bring them in. And then here's what we have found is that mishires happen at a 2-time higher rate when using contingent searches, because we're pulling from the lower pool of candidates. So here are some other benefits to a retained search that you might not have thought about. And the accountability. It is so easy for a contingent recruiter to walk away from a difficult search. They have no skin in the game. When you're retaining somebody to work on this role, you've paid them to specifically work on that role for the next several months with a dedicated resource. So they're obligated. You have a neck to wring to hold somebody accountable to that. Another thing is that in a contingent search, you can't be confidential. That word is going to spread out, and what if you're replacing somebody? You don't want them to find out about it. What if you're trying to recruit from a competitor? You don't want them to find out about it. Or if there was a breach and you're trying to keep that out of the news media, there's another good reason to keep this search confidential. Here's another thing that you may not have thought about is that a candidate has a much higher positive experience when they feel that they have been approached by a company on a retained search. They carry their heads higher, they stroke their egos, they feel very valued in that process. And even they'll tell others that, hey, that company uses retained searches to bring in key individuals. It actually elevates the reputation of the company out in the marketplace, where more candidates are going to want to come to that company. So you're going to start getting access to better A players because of that reputation. And then one other thing is that the guarantee of those candidates is usually longer. You know, at Fortify Experts, we've got at least a year guarantee on our retained searches, where on contingent searches, sometimes you'll see as little as 30 days. Maybe you'll get six months, but most of the time it's going to be 60 or 90 days only. So then, if retained searches are so great, why don't everybody use them? And most people think it's because of cost. Yes, contingent recruiting, there's some contingent recruiters that will do it for 15%, but I will tell you, in this industry, you get what you pay for. There's no way that you can get a high quality level of scrutiny and a candidate vetting at a 15% level. They're going to be throwing resumes at the company in order just to see if they can get something to stick on the wall. And on the other end of the scale, retained search firms are charging as much as 40%. And you can get a white glove service. They're really an extension of the HR department, and they're working hand in hand in partnership with those companies to ensure that key individuals are filled in those roles, and that the HR department is working in concert with them, and they do a fantastic service. But I'll tell you, at Fortify Experts, we have found that we can offer that level of service at really the same cost as a contingent search. We have been successful at that, and we find that the committed relationship to us is worth being able to offer that service at a very similar level of a contingent search. So here's a busy slide, but it gives you so much information on why you might want to consider going into a more committed relationship with your vendors, whether it's Fortify Experts or somebody else. And I'll tell you, to get to a better level of candidate, a higher top performer, moving to a more committed relationship where you've got one neck to wring, that they're not going to walk away from a tough search, that they're going to be completely confidential in how they deal out there, and that they're not going to be dragging your name through the mud in a competitive where multiple companies are working on the same position and confusing the candidates out there by double submitting them. That does nobody any good. With a focus of more of fit and quality instead of speed and quantity, you're going to have a lower mishire rate as well. And this really does provide a much more positive experience for the candidates out there. They're going to go talk about your company. They're going to come in the door the first day with their head held high and knowing that it's been a great experience. That leads to longer-term employment at your company and lowers the turnover rate. And then, of course, for us, it's really all about the same on the fee structure. So at Fortify Experts, we actually have two different models you might be interested in. Our engaged version is really just putting one foot in the water. It does require an upfront fee of just 10% of what the normal fee would be. And your internal recruiters can still recruit on the position. It does allow us to go out to the market and call it a retained search, just like an attorney would be retained with a down payment. And we can get access to those A players that you ultimately want to get access to. It elevates your company reputation out there. And we do provide a full weekly status report on how many candidates that we've been talking with, who we've been talking with, what their expected salaries are, so you can get some market information as you work through that position to make sure that we're headed in the right path in concert with you. The other model is a fully retained model, which is more traditional, which would be 1/3 up front, and then plus some progress payments along the way. It is exclusive, but we're also held 100% accountable to filling that position. This is where we partner with the HR department. We actually come in and define all the critical success factors along with the team. We develop the interview questionnaires. We develop the entire process and work to bring a slate of candidates so that you could hire any one of those candidates and be extremely satisfied with them. We want that to make your decision extremely hard on which one to pick, not can I pick one of them. And what's really good about this model is that, especially if it's a top person like a CISO or a director of a certain security domain, who's in your company qualified enough to actually interview that person to make sure that they really are qualified? We interview security leaders every single day, and we work with hundreds of them that we can pull from to ensure we're getting the very top candidates that are coming onto the table for you. And so we also do this with a complete confidentiality. So whether or not you work with us, I would hope that you would at least consider moving into a more committed relationship with your vendor. Certainly, we would love to be a part of that process, and we'd love to answer any questions that you may have. You can reach out to me at Tim Howard at FortifyExperts.com or our sales team at sales at Fortify Experts. We'd love to have a chat with you and explore how we can help you build a world-class security team. Thanks so much for your time.